Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our next members slot, members interview for our summer seminar. And I'm privileged, or we're privileged to be joined by Mike Kroll. I'll let Mike introduce himself in a moment, but welcome, Mike, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Right, Tim, thank you very much indeed. And actually, I think the privilege is mine, so cheers.
Fantastic, thank you. Let's get straight into it, Mike, because I know these things we want to keep as brief as possible. And I said to Mike, well, we've agreed 10 minutes, and I've already probably spoken for nearly a minute, so let's get going. But tell us a bit more about your background, Mike, and where you started out and where you've ended up now.
Okay, well, in terms of where I started out, I think, like many people, I left school and I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. And my first job was actually, I was a deckhand on a dredger, picking up mud from the bottom of Southampton Water and dumping it out in the English Channel. And after about 6 months of that, I got made redundant, and I started off on the hippie trail out to Asia. So I hitchhiked across Europe and the Middle East through Pakistan, India, Nepal into Southeast Asia, and I spent about 2 years on the road. And then I thought I'd better get a sensible job. So I cut my hair and I gave away my hippie pants, and I joined the army. Royal Engineers, which is absolutely fantastic. This sort of dates me a bit, Tim. I don't know what vintage you are. I suspect I got a couple of years on you, but I did my first tour on the Berlin Wall, and I was there when the wall came down. So that's it. You're talking to a piece of living history here.
I remember the wall coming down, so I'm older than you probably think. But yeah, I maybe slightly younger than yourself. But yeah,
brilliant. So I feel much better for you having said that. So in the army, as I say, I was in the Royal Engineers, but I did some specialist roles there. The first one was counter-terrorist search. Much of it was in support of the police, and I know that you have a policing background, Tim. And I don't know if you remember even further back, 1984, the Brighton bombing, when Mrs. Thatcher and her cabinet were blown up and several people were killed. In a hotel in Brighton. The IRA had left a long time delayed bomb in a bathroom and detonated it, when the conference was in full swing. And the army set up a unit to find deep buried bombs. So I was part of that unit. So followed Margaret Thatcher and her government around for about 18 months, doing that close support to the police. And then I went into conventional bomb disposal. I did my last tour in the Gulf after the first Gulf War. And then I just got fascinated in my trade. So I joined a humanitarian mine clearance charity called the Halo Trust, which most people associate with Princess Diana these days. And I cleared landmines in Cambodia, Afghanistan, the Balkans, and Mozambique. And then I ended up getting a sensible job, and I joined the Foreign Office. And I spent about 3.5 years with them out in Africa. And then from there, the war on terror was in full swing, and having had a bit of form in security, I ended up managing the Foreign Office crisis management team, and then their 24/7 response center, which is something like like a SOC these days. From there, I ran the overseas security network, embassy security. My next job, I was attached to the European Union in Brussels. I did a similar job looking after the European Union's embassies. From there to the UN Director Operations, working out of New York. From there, I went to Facebook, one of the most consequential companies on earth, something that's changed all of our lives in many ways. And I'm now an independent consultant. And in particular, I've done a lot on coronavirus. I do quite a lot on security culture and how you match the provision of security to organizations, how you communicate with staff. And in this very sort of crowded environment where you have emails, you have news, you have social media, you have the internet, you have so many sources of information. How do you grab people's attention and alter their behavior to make them safer and more secure? So that's a bit about me.
So I want a 10-minute interview on each of those careers, really, because that's a fascinating career path that you've come to. And I guess from where you started from, particularly where you ended up with the army, I'm amazed that you're still here, really, with the bomb disposal and the dangerous elements of that. But we're certainly pleased that you are. So thank you for sharing that, Mike. You mentioned that you've dealt with a lot around coronavirus as a consultant. So how have you found dealing with this pandemic in your work life? And has anything changed about that since dealing with the
Yeah.
pandemic?
Well, I think pandemics had a fairly profound effect on security. Some of it positive, some of it negative. On the negative side, I'm highly conscious that a lot of people have lost their livelihoods, and some people have lost their lives as well. And the security sector has been deeply affected by that. You're talking about, people on, frontline security, and I know that you work in the restaurant business these days, and I would imagine that the number of staff employed during the early days of the pandemic, dropped significantly. And these are not people who are living high on the hog. So I've always been really sensitive to people at that end of the market, who give everything on a day-to-day basis to the customer interface, and many of them, lost their livelihoods. On the plus side, I think it's brought security center stage. And we were talking earlier about business continuity management, crisis management, queue management. All of these things, it's boosted the profile of security, I think, for just about every organization.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And it's certainly something I try and keep grounded on, is these hardworking people that have either lost their livelihoods, as you say, or have certainly had a significant reduction in income, regardless of furlough and the schemes available. So yeah, absolutely. Well, we're here at the ASIS seminar, and I know you've been involved with ASIS for a while now. I don't know if you can remember how long you've been a member, but why ASIS? Why did you join ASIS, and why would you recommend it? Assuming you would recommend it, why would you recommend it to others?
Yeah, no, I would recommend it wholeheartedly, and for a lot of different reasons. I've been a member for about 10 years or so, and I've been a member of the Brussels chapter, the New York chapter, and the UK chapter. And my first chapter was in Brussels. I think, first of all, once you get into security, you realize it's actually a big world out there. There are lots of different elements to it. And ASIS is just a great forum for learning from your peer group. And I think, unlike other parts of a business or an organization where they tend to hold information pretty close, if you're in marketing or R&D or finance or anything like that, you tend not to share. Whereas in security, I think the mantra these days is not need to know, but need to share. And you learn an awful lot from your colleagues. And many of us sit within the same threat environment. So when I was in Facebook, for example, there was a group of tech companies that all got together. I would imagine the hospitality industry is the same. I know oil and gas is the same. So you have these professional security forums, but ASIS brings it all together. So there's brilliant opportunities to learn, to network. There's a great bunch of people within ASIS in all of the chapters that I've been a member of. I think also the qualifications, the education that they offer is the most widely recognized qualification in security. I mean, there's a lot of MSCs out there. I know the Security Institute have a very good educational program as well. But if you're in the global security business, the CPP, is a cliche, but it is the gold standard. And if you're looking for jobs these days, it's one of the key requirements for many opportunities. But the other aspect, Tim, that I think is really important is, ASIS, the A stands for America. And America has an absolutely extraordinary security business and security culture, which counterintuitively is much older and much more established than the British one or anything out in Europe. So if we take a look at companies like Pinkerton, like Burns, like Brinks, they all started in the late 19th century. And the I in ASIS, this is about industrial security. So when Henry Ford was mass producing, the Model T, he had about 14,000 workers, and he had a security workforce of about 6,000. If it had been a regular police force, it would have been the third largest police force in the United States. They had very restive labor relations in the early days of the American Industrial Revolution. And let me kind of cross-reference here to just before the American entry into the First World War, the Americans, and it's incredible to think these days, but the Americans supplied the Russians with a lot of arms and ammunition. And in 1916, some German saboteurs blew up an ammunition depot in New York Harbor. It killed 4 people, injured many more. The property damage on the New Jersey shore in particular was vast, and even took out part of the Statue of Liberty. Now, as a result of that, sorry, this is a bit of a shaggy dog story. As a result of that, when America entered the war in 1917, they decided they needed to protect all of their military facilities and their industrial facilities. So they recruited an organization called the USG, United States Guards, and there were about 30,000 of them. And at the end of the war, they were all disbanded. Come the Second World War, America was fighting on two fronts. You know, Pearl Harbor was even bigger than 9/11 in terms of the shock to the sort of American psyche, and the military technological interface was that much larger. You know, they had not only tanks and aircraft, they had nuclear weapons. So they recruited for the Second World War 200,000 guards for their military industrial complex. And at the end of the war, they went straight into the Cold War. So the 200,000 guards were military guards, and they were disbanded. They were essentially privatized. So all of a sudden, you know, by 1950, America had over 1 million security guards. In 1950, in the UK, we had about 5,000 security guards. Wow. So ASIS was formed in 1955. And it was because the requirement for the American military was just so exacting, so complex, that all the private security companies that were providing for the industrial military complex got together so they could interpret the rules, so they could learn from each other. So the American,
never realized that there was that military link. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So the American security business is much longer established and very much larger than the British or European business ever has been. And so, you know, we have an amazing opportunity through ASIS to learn from everything that's gone before. So that's why I love ASIS.
Fantastic, thank you. Now we might actually be slightly over 10 minutes already, but I'll take the blame for this. But I think if we could take the last couple of minutes really just to talk about, you've already mentioned your varied career, so we won't go all over it again. But what have you enjoyed most in your time of working, either in, you know, the military or the Foreign Office or any of those things?
Maybe two things that stick in mind. I mean, you know, the military, you were a police officer, and you know, those early years in your sort of police or military career are just fantastic. You know, you're in your 20s, you're given a lot of responsibility. That was tremendous fun. But for me, it was clearing landmines in Cambodia, up in the north of the country, bouncing around in a Land Rover, going to little villages out there, being often, you know, the only foreigner, you know, out there in the jungle. And I can remember going into one village and everyone just crowding around me, and a little old lady coming out rubbing my skin, and she's laughing and laughing and laughing. And I said to my translator, "Why is she laughing so much?" He said, "Well, she's heard of white people, but she never believed they really existed." And then I spent 3 months clearing landmines from around that village. So professionally, I think that was the most rewarding thing. And on the security side, I think it's probably going across to the European Union. I was their first head of security for the European Diplomatic Service, and setting that up, working in a really diverse, multicultural environment. You know, that was just an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, wow. Well, I set up a cordon for an unexploded World War II bomb in Croydon, though, not Cambodia. So maybe I can relate to it a little bit, but probably not. Yeah. Just finally, Mike, and as I say, we're running out of time, but I ask this question a lot to people, and I keep it in all the time because I just think it's a really interesting question to ask. But if you could rewind the clock and speak to your, I guess, 21-year-old self or young self when you were first starting out in life, what advice would you give a young Mike Kroll if you could go back in time?
I say, go back, it's a trap. No, that's a great question, Tim. I mean, I think when you're 21, you're full of enthusiasm and anxiety. So I think I'd say to myself, look, forget about the anxiety, everything will be okay. Also, I never knew what I wanted to do when I grew up. I still don't really know what I want to do, but I always wanted to have a varied international career. So I succeeded in that. And I've had three main criteria for any job. I wanted them to be interesting, worthwhile, and hopefully fun as well. And then in terms of advice, and you might relate to this, Tim, based on our earlier conversation, I think work-life balance is really important. And this job is often 24/7. You never get away. I've often worked way too hard and I haven't paid enough attention to my family, and I paid the price for that as well. And there were some things there that I definitely regret. And the other is about choose who you work with very carefully. You spend often more time with your work colleagues than you do with your family, and often in very strenuous circumstances. You need a lot of resilience, and resilience is not necessarily what's within you, it's what's between you when you're a team. So having that sort of trusting environment. So I would say, choose your team well, choose your boss well. I think that's what I would say to my 21-year-old self.
No, that's great advice, and I can certainly relate to a lot of that. Mike, I think we're going to pick this conversation up another time, because I really want to ask you loads more questions about some of the stuff you've said. So hopefully you'll be willing to join us again sometime and continue the conversation. But really appreciate your time, and hopefully, I know it's raining all day today, but hopefully the sun will come back out again, because we've certainly enjoyed it the last few days. But thanks for your time.
Great. Thank you, Tim.
Bye-bye.